How greatly we should like to exchange the false assertions of the priests that there is a God who desires good from us, a guardian and witness of every action, every movement, every thought, who loves us and seeks our welfare in all misfortune. How greatly we would like to exchange these ideas for truths which would be just as healing, pacifying, and beneficial as those errors. But there are no such truths. At most, philosophy can oppose to them metaphysical appearances. The tragedy consists in the fact that we cannot believe those dogmas of religion and metaphysics if we have strict methods of truth in heart and brain. On the other hand, mankind has, through development, become so delicate, irritable, and suffering that it has need of the highest means of healing and consolation. Whence also the danger arises that man would bleed to death from recognized truth, or more correctly, from discovered error. But assuredly, frivolity or melancholy of every degree is better than a romantic retrospection and desertion of the flag, an approach to Christianity in any form, for according to the present condition of knowledge, it is absolutely impossible to approach it without hopelessly soiling our intellectual conscience and giving ourselves away to ourselves and others. Those pains may be unpleasant enough, but we cannot become leaders and educators of mankind without pain, and woe to him who would wish to attempt this and no longer have that clear conscience. When on a Sunday morning we hear the old bells ring out, we ask ourselves, is it possible? This is done on account of a Jew being crucified 2,000 years ago who said he was the Son of God. The proof of such an assertion is wanting. Certainly, in our times, the Christian religion is an antiquity that dates from very early ages, and the fact that its assertions are still believed, when otherwise all claims are subjected to such strict examination, is perhaps the oldest part of this heritage. A God who creates a son from a mortal woman, a sage who requires that a man should no longer work, no longer judge, but should pay attention to the signs of the approaching end of the world. A justice that accepts an innocent being as a substitute and sacrifice, one who commands his disciples to drink his blood. Prayers for miraculous intervention, sins committed against a God and atoned for through a God, the fear of a future to which death is the portal, the form of the cross in an age which no longer knows the signification and the shame of the cross. How terrible all this appears to us, as if risen from the grave of the ancient past. Is it credible that such things are still believed? The Greeks did not regard the Homeric gods as raised above them like masters, nor themselves as being under them like servants, as the Jews did. They only saw as in a mirror the most perfect examples of their own caste, an ideal, therefore, and not an opposite of their own nature. There is a feeling of relationship, a mutual interest arises, a kind of simicky. Man thinks highly of himself when he gives himself such goods and places himself in a relation like that of the lower nobility towards the higher, while the Italian nations hold a genuine peasant faith with perpetual fear of evil and mischievous powers and tormenting spirits. Wherever the Olympian gods retreated into the background, Greek life was more somber and more anxious. Christianity, on the contrary, oppressed man and crushed him utterly, sinking him as if in deep mire. Then, into the feeling of absolute depravity, it suddenly threw the light of divine mercy, so that the surprised man, dazzled by forgiveness, gave a cry of joy and for a moment believed that he bore all heaven within himself. All psychological feelings of Christianity work upon this unhealthy excess of sentiment, and upon the deep corruption of head and heart it necessitates. It desires to destroy, break, stupefy, confuse only one thing it does not desire, namely moderation, and therefore it is in the deepest sense barbaric, Asiatic, ignoble, and un-Greek. There are sober and industrious people on whom religion is embroidered like a hem of higher humanity. These do well to remain religious. It beautifies them. All people who do not understand some kind of trade in weapons, tongue and pen included as weapons, become servile. For such the Christian religion is very useful, for then servility assumes the appearance of Christian virtues and is surprisingly beautified. People to whom their daily life appears too empty and monotonous easily grow religious. This is comprehensible and excusable, only they have no right to demand religious sentiments from those whose daily life is not empty and monotonous. If Christianity were right with its theories of an avenging God, of general sinfulness, of redemption, and the danger of eternal damnation, it would be a sign of weak intellect and lack of character not to become a priest, apostle, or hermit, and to work only with fear and trembling for one's own salvation. It would be senseless thus to neglect eternal benefits for temporary comfort. Taking it for granted that there is belief, the commonplace Christian is a miserable figure, a man that really cannot add two and two together, and who, moreover, just because of his mental incapacity for responsibility, did not deserve to be so severely punished as Christianity has decreed. It is a clever stroke on the part of Christianity to teach the utter unworthiness, sinfulness, and despicableness of mankind so loudly that the disdain of their fellow men is no longer possible. He may sin as much as he likes. He is not essentially different from me. It is I who am unworthy and despicable in every way, says the Christian to himself. But even this feeling has lost its sharpest sting, because the Christian no longer believes in his individual despicableness. He is as bad as men are generally, and comforts himself a little with the axiom, "We are all of one kind." As soon as religion triumphs, it has for its enemies all those who would have been its first disciples. Christianity arose for the purpose of lightening the heart, but now it must first make the heart heavy in order afterwards to lighten it. Consequently, it will perish. Whoever now allows scope to his religious feelings must also let them increase. He cannot do otherwise. His nature then gradually changes. It favors whatever is connected with and near to the religious element. The whole extent of judgment and feeling becomes clouded, overcast with religious shadows. Sensation cannot stand still. One must therefore take care. So long as one knows well the strength and weakness of one's doctrine, one's art, one's religion, its power is still small. The disciple and apostle who has no eyes for the weaknesses of the doctrine, the religion, and so forth, dazzled by the aspect of the master and by his reverence for him, has on that account usually more power than the master himself. Without blind disciples, the influence of a man in his work has never become great. To help a doctrine to victory often means only so to mix it with stupidity that the weight of the latter carries off also the victory for the former. There is not enough religion in the world even to destroy religions. If it is understood how sin came into the world, namely through errors of reason by which men held each other, even the single individual held himself to be much blacker and much worse than was actually the case, the whole sensation will be much lightened, and man and the world will appear in a blaze of innocence which it will do one good to contemplate. In the midst of nature, man is always the child per se. This child sometimes has a heavy and terrifying dream, but when it opens its eyes, it always finds itself back again in paradise. Because it was remarked that excitement frequently made the mind clearer and produced happy inspirations, it was believed that the happiest inspirations and suggestions were called forth by the greatest excitement, and so the insane were revered as wise and oracular. This is based on a false conclusion. The aim of modern science is as little pain as possible, as long a life as possible. A kind of eternal blessedness, therefore, but certainly a very modest one as compared with the promises of religions. There is not sufficient love and goodness in the world to permit us to give some of it away to imaginary beings. However much we may think we've weaned ourselves from religion, it has nevertheless not been done so thoroughly as to deprive us of pleasure in encountering religious sensations and moods in music, for instance. And if a philosophy shows us the justification of metaphysical hopes and the deep peace of soul to be thence acquired, and speaks, for instance, of the whole certain gospel in the gaze of Raphael's Madonnas, we receive such statements and expositions particularly warmly. Here the philosopher finds it easier to prove. That which he desires to give corresponds to a heart that desires to receive. Hence it may be observed how the less thoughtful free spirits really only take offense at the dogmas, but are well acquainted with the charm of religious sensations. They are sorry to lose hold of the latter for the sake of the former. Scientific philosophy must be very careful not to smuggle in errors on the ground of that need, a need which has grown up and is consequently temporary. Even logicians speak of presentiments of truth in ethics and art, which should be forbidden to them. Between the carefully established truths and such presaged things there remains the unbridgeable chasm that those are due to intellect and these to requirement. Hunger does not prove that food exists to satisfy it, but that it desires food. To presage does not mean the acknowledgement of the existence of a thing in any one degree, but its possibility insofar as it is desired or feared. Presage does not advance one step into the land of certainty. We believe involuntarily that the portions of a philosophy which are tinged with religion are better proved than others, but actually it is the contrary. But we have the inward desire that it may be so, that that which makes blessed, therefore, may also be true. This desire misleads us to accept bad reasons for good ones.